opened up 3 lanes to get out, and there was 2 lanes coming in that were, for emergency traffic, basically. But I took a picture, and it was just a wall of smoke from here. I couldn't see past those trees right there. It was just a wall of smoke, and I was just like, man, this isn't good. I didn't think we were going to be able to outrun it.
Wildfires continue to scorch large parts of the West Coast, prompting thousands of U.S. residents to flee their homes in order to outrun the blaze. Details in just a bit with a live report.
And we mourn deeply for the nearly 3,000 precious and beautiful souls who were taken from us on September 11th, 2001.
And today marks another somber occasion. It's been 19 years since the deadly terrorist attacks on New York City's World Trade Center. We'll honor the victims and speak with a former law enforcement officer to get his perspective on the attack and where we've come since. And finally, the U.S. government has charged an additional 50 people with fraud after they allegedly stole millions of dollars in PPP funds to support a lavish lifestyle. All that and so much more coming up on News On. Hello and welcome to News On. I'm Miranda. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been 19 years since terrorists hijacked passenger jets, slamming into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and crashing into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The president spoke in Pennsylvania today about the attack earlier. He said that we cannot fill the void in your heart or erase the terrible sorrow of this day. Nearly 3,000 lives were lost that day, some 2,700 of them in New York, marking the deadliest terror attack in our country's history. Thousands more, including many first responders, later lost their lives to health complications due to working at or being near Ground Zero. And as we've reported for each of the past 18 years, thousands have gathered at the World Trade Center site to honor the lives of those who perished. But thanks to COVID-19, this year's memorial was supposed to be, and it still was, very different. Families of 9/11 victims gathered at the site, and they were supposed to not include a live reading of the victims' names. The 9/11 Memorial Museum was supposed to instead play a recording of their names. But despite the threat posed by COVID-19, families gathered and read out loud the names of the victims. In Washington, D.C., at both the White House and Congress, and in New York City, a moment of silence was observed at 8:46 a.m., the moment the first tower was hit. Both President Trump and his opponent, Joe Biden, will honor the victims at memorials throughout the day, as we will hear on America's Voice News. The Trump administration, meanwhile, could stop coronavirus screenings of passengers from overseas arriving to the U.S. That's according to 3 officials familiar with the plans. The U.S. started enhanced screenings of passengers arriving from Wuhan, China, at select airports back in January. Over the following months, additional airports began the process of checking passengers from high-risk countries. But the administration now appears set to end those screenings. Of the 675,000 passengers screened at various airports, fewer than 15 have been identified as having COVID-19. The Department of Homeland Security declined to comment. The other major story that we're continuing to follow today, wildfires. Major wildfires continue to just ravage the West Coast, killing more than a dozen people. Not helping matters, strong winds and dry conditions. The fast-moving wildfires have turned much of the landscape into just complete ash, leaving some homeowners with nothing but memories now.
Terrible. I mean, I've never seen devastation like this ever in my life. Yeah, you do in war, but not here. And I wasn't in war, but that's what you see here, And I don't know how we're going to recover too easy.
We didn't have time to think. It was my mom and me and my kids and my grandmother, who's quite elderly and needs a lot of health care. And we heard the fires were a long ways off, and then we heard, you got to get out now. And all we had was time to grab some basic stuff real fast and just get out. And when we hit the door, we saw black over the house coming and
at some satellite images showing parts of California. Actually, we're going to try to get to that, but again, just covered in a blanket of smoke. Fire crews from other states were on hand trying to get an upper hand on some of the blazes there. We now want to head out to California. Is that what we're going to do? I believe we're going to go out there. Okay, so we're now going to head out to California, where America's Voice News contributor Ben Berkwam has been just on the ground there surveying the scene. This is just heartbreaking to see, Ben. I mean, we're hearing reports that as many as 10% of the population in Oregon has been forced to evacuate because of these wildfires. What can you tell us?
And it's devastating. And the saddest part to me is that this could be prevented. We have the ability to manage the forests, but we haven't done it for 30 years. And so we've burned over 3 million acres this year alone. That's roughly 10% of all of our forests. And, it's set to burn even more. And so we're bracing for what's to come. It's still hot. You can see behind me, it's still so dry, and the winds are still blowing. And so what we anticipate is more fire, unfortunately, in California. Yeah,
we've seen, about a dozen? Is that what it is? How many wildfires have been going on? I know they said one of the... Go ahead.
Over 600, but there's been, roughly a dozen that have grown out of control into the catastrophic wildfires that we see. And right now, that's the problem, is our firefighters are stretched too thin. Mm-hmm. There's only so many resources that can go around, and the fires are just everywhere. We were up there yesterday, and it's unfathomable unless you actually go up there. It looks like a nuclear bomb went off in certain places. Just burned down to the ground floor.
Yeah.
And it's tragic. Homes and businesses and livelihoods. And the saddest part was, as we were going up, we actually passed by. This is my community. This is where I grew up.
Yeah.
So it's got a personal feel to me. And we drove by. They're stationed at my high school where I was at, where I went to school. But the saddest part was we passed going up there the lumber mill, the Auberry lumber mill, and that's where so many people used to work when we had timber harvesting here in California. When that was shut down, the whole economy of that area was destroyed, and now it's being destroyed by fire because we're not managing the forests that we used to do. And it's just, the saddest part is it could be prevented if we stop the radical environmentalism that prevents controlled burns and thinning of the forests and grazing and all the rest of it.
Well, I'm sure there are a lot of people that feel the same way as you do. And so we'd like to know your thoughts on that. Do you agree with Ben? Could this be preventable? You can always let your voice be heard by joining our community platform, which you can find on our website at americasvoice.news. Ben Berkwam, again, thank you so much for your time. Thoughts and prayers go out to you and your family, and hopefully we get some rain, much needed rain for that area, and the winds die down. Thank you so much for your time. Meanwhile, in other news today, the U.S. government charges 50 more people for using Paycheck Protection Program loans to buy luxury items. Just so disheartening to hear. A Department of Justice attorney held a news conference, this happened yesterday, to announce those fraud charges. He said the defendants used the money to travel and buy cars, jewelry, and adult entertainment.
The money these defendants stole was taxpayer money. Every dollar received was a dollar drawn from the American people's account. Even worse, every dollar they took was a dollar that we had all set aside to help our fellow Americans weather one of the worst national crises in recent history. And as we allege, these defendants tried to steal those funds for themselves. PPP funds, as I mentioned earlier, were intended to help keep American businesses afloat. They were intended to help ordinary, everyday Americans pay their bills and put food on the table. I can assure you that they were not intended to help support fraudsters' dreams of owning Lamborghinis, Rolls Royces, Range Rovers, or diamonds.
And the new arrests mean the Justice Department has now prosecuted 57 people since the Payment Protection Program began. They've been able to recover or freeze more than $30 million in funds. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is adding a new way to report the coronavirus death rates. The CDC will now report the infection fatality ratio by age. Now, using this factor, the CDC says less than 1% of people who contracted the virus have actually died from it, except in the case of those who were over the age of 70. That death rate for people in that age group is more than 5 times that of other age ranges. It stands at nearly 5.5%. The CDC report is based on estimates since the agency does not know the exact number of infections. Still so much more to come here on this edition of News On. Liberty University's Faith Summit is officially in the books, and after the break, our very own Dr. Gina Loudon will bring us a very special interview with one of the summit's top speakers. You don't want to miss it. Stick around. And welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Kahn. Yesterday, Liberty University Falkirk Center held its annual Faith Summit. It's an event held every year that highlights the university's featured leaders who are stepping up and stepping out in the public sphere for their faith in an effort to impact the way we govern. Our very own Dr. Gina Loudon covered the event and got a chance to speak with some of the keynote speakers there, including this conversation that she had with Turning Point USA's Charlie Kirk. Check it out.
And Charlie Kirk with me now. He's been knocking on doors. He started his podcast, what, Charlie? Maybe a year ago?
Year and a half ago, yeah.
A year and a half already. Wow, time flies, and it's been so tremendously successful. You're syndicating and going up on radio now. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on your show as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we're doing exciting things too, but you have really not stopped for a second for the president.
Yes.
I know 25 states, I believe, in like a little over 30
That's
days,
correct.
if I'm not mistaken.
Every battleground state and every state in between, from Maine, going to Minnesota actually this weekend.
Very exciting.
Minnesota's in play. The president can win Minnesota.
So I believe that too.
Yeah.
I want to back up just a little bit though. I want you to tell me about that. But I am just so wondering how it is you do the logistics of this. How do you do the podcast, and now you're going to syndicate a radio show, and you do all of this while you're knocking on doors for the president in 25 states in 30 days?
Also running Turning Point USA, our 501c3 side.
Yeah.
We have Falkirk. We got all sorts of different things going on.
And you're doing TV all the time, and you're making speeches all over the country, and just the logistics
great team.
of
First
this.
of all, I wish I could take credit for it. We have an unbelievable team at Turning Point Action, Turning Point USA. Tyler Boyer does an amazing job for us. No, it's incredible.
Tyler is great.
It's great, and I just work here. So I travel and I speak, and look, it's really, we have a kind of our mission statement. We operate where we play offense with a sense of urgency to win America's culture war. And the main part of that is sense of urgency. That's been lacking from the conservative movement. Some people agree we're losing the country, but I think it's more imminent than ever before. And we need to be acting more, we need to be donating more, we need to be knocking on more doors. We're running out of time here. The clock on Western civilization is ticking.
It is.
And so we need to double and triple our efforts. I am trying to embody that, not just say that. So I'm first and foremost an activist, and then all those other things. Podcast, radio, and all that. But the most important thing for me is I'm actually trying to do something about this, not just talk about it.
And so what is your greatest fear with this upcoming election? Where are we the most
vulnerable,
or the most at risk? What could catch us blindsided?
Well, the mail-in ballot thing is a huge problem, and some Republicans are coming out and saying, "Oh, it helps us." I don't understand how that is even remotely the case when you have thousands and tens of thousands and millions of ballots going out that no one requested. I mean, I know people that have gotten 6 ballots sent to their home, and no one has a good answer to this at all. And so it's very possible. In fact, the Bloomberg group admitted this, that there'd be a red mirage. I'm horrified that we will be celebrating on election night, and they're going to steal it from us in the coming weeks. So
is there a preparation for that?
There needs to be.
A lot of people who are donating big money are asking me, are we prepared for that?
Probably not.
And how does one prepare for that?
Well, just ask Young Kim. Young Kim in Orange County, California, went to freshman orientation as a Republican congresswoman. And while she was at freshman orientation, they tapped her on her shoulder, and they said, "Hey, just kidding, you lost your race." And then she said, "What do you mean?" They said, "They just found another 7,000 ballots, and most of them were out of your favor." She said, "I'm at orientation." They said, "No, you got to go back. You're done."
Yeah.
People, this was just in 2018. This was just, she went to orientation. She thought the election was so in her favor. So look, the answer is we should be filing lawsuits across the country, and we're not. The Democrats are filing 30 lawsuits for every one that we file. And so I'm not pessimistic about it. I think that it can still be fixed, but if we don't get, and look, the president agrees with me. I've talked to him about this at length. He knows the vote by mail thing can be the greatest fraud in American history. That you can go march in the streets, you can go to a cannabis dispensary, you can get an abortion, can't go to church, you can go to Home Depot, Lowe's, or the grocery store, Starbucks, but you can't go to vote. I mean, I ate at a Chili's yesterday, okay? This is not a commercial for Chili's, but people were plenty up and close to each other, okay? And these are the same people that are now saying, "I can't go vote." Like, just stop it, okay?
Right.
You could do the same election we did in 2016. If you think masks work, then go wear 4 of them, and go wear a face shield, okay? And go vote. Keep the integrity of our elections. This is not the election to go blow it up. That's the first vulnerability. The second vulnerability is social media and tech fraud. And no one's talking about this. Very few people are, because most of the Republican Party is purchased by Silicon Valley. Most of them are just proxies by the big tech companies. But Google has said they're not going to let Trump win. They've said that. And so whether or not they have as much power as we think they do, we'll see. So if Trump loses, which I don't think he will, but if Trump loses, it'll be because of vote by mail and social media.
So you want to activate your folks out there, young and old. We want everybody involved. That's what everybody talks about all the time. But you've got these activists out there who feel a little helpless, Charlie. They feel like, I may knock on every single door. I can donate all the money I have. I can do everything in my power as an activist, and it could still be taken away from me.
Yes.
What do you say to that person?
Well, there are very few of those people. I want to be very clear. They're out there, but there's a lot of people who think they're being active and they're not. And this is just a harsh wake-up call for the conservative movement. I mean, I tell the people, like, oh, I'm an activist. All right, who are your 5 school board members, and what are they fighting through right now? When's the last time you went to a meeting? And the answer is almost never. We have just decided school board races don't matter. And so don't give me this whole long speech about how big. I'm not trying to diminish them. There's plenty of great activists out there, and you and I know them from the Tea Party movement. There's people that really make a whole spirit out of it. But we don't have an activist culture in the conservative movement. We have a spectator culture. And we're actually better spectators than the left. We listen to more talk radio. We watch more Fox News. We share more social media posts. We as conservatives are actually way more of a spectator culture. The left is less spectator culture, more activist culture. They actually listen to Maddow less. They don't listen to as much talk radio. They don't share as much social media content, but they're actually way more involved than we are. So how did that happen? So there's a transmission gap here between what we're processing, what we're doing. And so look, the people that, if we had right now, we will win if 1 million people work as hard as they possibly can. That's all it's going to take. It takes 1 million conservative activists. But I can tell you right now, we're doing Super Saturdays across the country. Okay, we do Super Saturday in Western Michigan, North Carolina, where we're getting people to go knock on doors. I've never had such difficulty getting people active over the age of 40. The young people are out there in numbers. But there's just kind of I'm really worried about the country. Okay, you're watching Rush Limbaugh and watching Tucker, and you bought a pillow. Congratulations, okay? And you gave $35 to Trump. Why don't you go do something about it? Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to raise the temperature of expectations in the conservative movement, because we could do so much more, and we should.
And so what's your charge to that person who's sitting at home right now? What do they do? Give them an instruction right now.
Go make 10,000 phone calls for Trump in the next 2 weeks.
And how do they do that? And how do they know who to call?
I mean, it's so simple. I mean, you just contact any one of the victory offices. You can go to tpaction.com, our 501c4. We have Super Saturdays across the country. I can't promote the campaign stuff because I'm not part of the campaign, but I'm sure if one person goes to donaldjtrump.com, they can find out places to do it. Your county party should be doing that if you're afraid to leave your home, and that's fine, because there's ways to remote dial from home where you could literally make calls without having to go to a phone bank. But here's the biggest question. We think way so macro. Go own your precinct. This is if I had to say what's wrong with the conservative activist movement right now, it is we're thinking way too big by not thinking small. How are your neighbors voting? Have you talked to them? Have you taken them out to coffee or lunch? They say, well, it's uncomfortable. I'm like, well, then that's the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Conservatives are more likely to want to go to a neighborhood 30 miles away from them than go to their neighbor's home. Think about that.
Local politics is the most uncomfortable.
It's most uncomfortable. It's most personal. I'm really willing to go, if I live in Palm Beach, to Orlando to go tell people about Trump, but go knock on doors, I don't know. I might have, that's exactly the problem, right?
So and the people in the church pews next to you.
There are tens of thousands of precincts that will determine the future of our country. Own your precinct. A precinct is maybe 100 doors, maybe 200, depending on how many precincts your state has in your county. Own the block. Know how they're voting. Supply the yard signs. We have them for sale at tpaction.com. There is a Trump yard sign deficit in our country. We're trying to fill it as an outside group. We're selling them for just that cost, right? So we're supplying activists with tens. I'm a yard sign believer. These consultants are like, oh, yard signs don't win elections. That's foolish. You have no idea what we're talking about. Because when Sally Sue has a Trump yard sign and there's 500 cars that drive by, people know Sally Sue's house. And it makes them more likely to support Trump. So I'm a big believer, and I've seen it work, so that's just my opinion. And by the way, they're also really good indicators of who's going to win. But look, here's the biggest thing is are you really doing enough, or are you saying you're doing enough? I'm trying to challenge that premise every single day, right? I'm like, and can I be doing more to save this country, right? Traveling, raising money, doing podcast radio, campus visits. You're doing so much. If you're not exhausted, then I think you're not doing enough. And there's a lot of conservatives that are, and I will say, to your point, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. I guess, you show up to the county office every single day and you knock on doors till your hands bleed. So that's how I got my start in politics, right? And that's how more people should as well.
Yeah, well, I think that's sage advice, and especially because there's so little time left, and you're going to wake up the day after it's over one way or another.
Well, it might take days and weeks.
It might.
And then Biden might all of a sudden, they might find ballots for Biden. I'm telling you, don't be surprised if that happens. And if that happens, the country's done. If it happens in that fashion, where if there's a high of a Trump victory and then a low of a Biden ballot, I'm telling you right now, that is not going to be a good circumstance. It's not. And I'm not saying that it's going to get violent. I'm not supporting it. I'm saying the chaos that will ensue from that, from, oh, we have another 4 years of Trump, to just kidding, we found these ballots, you will lose faith in the entire system.
Yeah.
A lot of people will. And that's not good.
Yeah, absolutely. Charlie Kirk.
Thank you, Gina.
And still ahead on News On, it's a day that will live on in American history forever. 19 years ago, the nation watched in horror as the worst attack ever on U.S. soil unfolded. We'll discuss that fateful day and how the country has recovered since. That's coming up next. And welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Khan. Today, families come together again to honor their loved ones who lost their lives on 9/11 or as a result of the deadliest terrorist attack on American soil. The flags will be at half-staff and the bells will toll in New York City as they have in years past, sounding a peal of collective mourning for those killed on one of the darkest days in American history. For much more on this, I'd like to welcome in our very own America's Voice news contributor, Jessica Rivera. Thank you so much. It's good to be together.
It is, and I'm so happy that we were able to do this today, Miranda. And I know that as we remember 9/11, 2001, 19 years ago today, we also have to remember 8 years ago in Benghazi, Libya, to September 11th, 2012. And that's when Islamic terrorists actually attacked two U.S. facilities of ours, one being our diplomatic compound and the other our CIA annex, and that resulted in the deaths of 4 Americans: U.S. Ambassador to Libya Christopher Stevens, U.S. Foreign Service Officer Sean Smith, along with CIA contractors Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty. All 4 were killed there at the compound. And while just a mile away at the CIA annex, there was an annex security team that was there, and those are former soldiers, and they're there to protect the compound and any sort of any Americans that we have there. And in 2016, a movie by the name of 13 Hours, which I'm pretty sure you know of.
Know it very well.
People do, yep, came out, and this best recalls the events of that day, so I want to just play a really quick little clip of that, if we can.
Benghazi is under attack. We need immediate assistance.
You have a U.S. ambassador at risk. You gotta send us.
You're not the first responders. You will wait.
Let's go! We gotta move!
We have no jurisdiction in this country. We're not even supposed to be here.
Losing the initiative.
Stand down!
If you do not get here soon,
We are all gonna die.
none of you have to go. But we are the only help they have.
And Miranda, one of those 6, I know, absolutely. That movie is so amazing. If you haven't seen it, go and see it. But one of those courageous 6 was former U.S. Marine Mark Geist, also known as Oz in the movie. And he is joining us today to speak about this. So if we can welcome in Mark. Thank you so much for being with us, Mark, today.
Hey, thank you, ladies, for having me today.
Yeah, pleasure's all ours. And Mark, so really quickly, I just want to know, what do you want people to remember about that day, since you were there firsthand? And I know a lot of people ask, were you guys really given the orders to stand down before you went into the compound?
You know, I think the most important thing is we need to remember how important it is to have the right leadership in place in this country. Unfortunately, the leadership that we had at that time failed to respond to the people that were on the ground both before the attack and after. And because of that, we had 4 Americans that got killed unnecessarily.
Yeah. And speaking of which, I mean, as you know, we're also remembering 9/11 today. And one of the questions that we asked our viewers, and we're going to be sharing those comments a little bit later, is do you feel safer today than you did on 9/11? So I'm going to ask that question to you. Do you think America is safer today than it was on 9/11?
I think I have to qualify that with the fact that I think we're safer from Islamic militants safer now than what we were in 2001. But the problem we have now is that evil that was the Islamic terrorists has been replaced by Black Lives Matter.
And Mark, I just wanted to make sure that you were done answering before I came in with my next question. And that question is, I know back then, we're going to go back to the Benghazi situation, and then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who was under much of the investigation or leadership, and as you spoke about. And here's a clip of her testimony in front of Congress, and I just wanted to play it for our viewers really quickly.
The fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
And Mark, not to really rehash anything, but what were your thoughts back then when this came out? And do you still have feelings about about her response to Benghazi?
I do. You know, it shows the crass approach that the leadership of that administration had, not only to Benghazi, but to everything that they did. I mean, Secretary of State and Vice President Biden and President Obama were instrumental in overthrowing the dictator of Libya and not having enough forward thought to see what the potential ramifications of that are. And I think they were looking for that immediate win that thing that Hillary Clinton could use when she ran for election in 2016, say, look at my foreign policy experience. Look at how I was able to put together this coalition. And because it was all about her and all about the administration and the leadership there and not about the people on the ground, that's why it failed.
Yeah. Mark, finally, I want to ask you, what do you think is the biggest threat facing Americans today as we are just now less than 2 months away from the presidential election? What do you think is the biggest threat?
In a lot of our democratic cities, I think the biggest threat is people being afraid to be an American. People being afraid to wear a flag, wear a MAGA hat, wear whatever they want to speak their voice and speak their mind, with the fear of getting beat up or getting hit in the back of the head with a skateboard, and that mob mentality that has been prevalent in so many cities across our country right now.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you mentioned Black Lives Matter, and we've seen all these protests, violent protests, some of them erupting throughout the country. And this happened, it's been leading up to 9/11, where we're now paying tribute and honoring a lot of those first responders, firefighters, police officers who risked their own lives in an effort to save others. Do you think these will eventually, so to speak, calm down in the weeks ahead, or do you think this is something we're going to continue to see with the violence? I mean,
I pray every day for those that are bringing this hate and this evil to our country, to our cities, to our American citizens, that the Lord will open up their hearts to see what really is good. Today is that day that we should all look at what America can do when we look for the good in everything.
Yeah.
When we come together as Americans, put aside our differences, put aside politics, and come together. I mean, and that's what we have to be successful, and get rid of this left and right thing, and remember that deep down we're all Americans and we want the same thing. We want to be able to have our kids go to school and get a good education. We want to be safe when we're walking down the streets. And we want to be able to make $1 without the government sticking their hand in our back pocket with over-regulation to take 2/3 of it out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark, so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And from all of us here at America's Voice News, we really appreciate your service and all the many who have served, and especially those who we are remembering today.
Yeah.
Yes. So
almost
thank you so much.
3,000 lives lost 19 years ago today. Thank you so much. And thank you, Jessica. It's good to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Hot, dry, and windy weather has played a major role in the rapid spread of wildfires throughout the West Coast. We brought you a live report earlier. We're going to give you an update on weather conditions there. We're also going to get to some of your comments, some of you telling us whether or not you feel safer today than you did on 9/11. We're going to share your voice coming up next. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News On. We'd like to send it over now to Weather Nation's Rob Bradley and Kara James for a look at today's nationwide forecast.
Well, good Friday to you. I'm Rob Bradley with your update from Weather Nation, and we are still tracking the tropics. The tropical wave now given a name, Invest 96. That means we're running model data on this. This is spinning up near the Bahamas, expected across portions of Florida as we head through your Friday and Saturday to bring a chance for flooding to the region. But the National Hurricane Center is also tracking this tropical low, giving it a medium chance to develop as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico through the end of the weekend and early next week. So that could become a tropical depression into early next week with potential impacts for portions of the Gulf Coast. The other wave we're watching is expected to move down to the south towards Mexico through the end of the weekend into early next week. We have a lot of warm water in the Gulf of Mexico. It is September. This is typically when those Gulf of Mexico waters start to reach some of their warmest of the year, 85 to 87 degrees. Even out in the Atlantic, we have mid 80 degree temperatures, a lot of warm water to fuel these potential storms. Now, our second area of low pressure is expected to drift to the west and southwest. It's going to be steered farther to the south. So hopefully folks in the United States won't have to worry about impacts from this, though it still could bring some heavy rain to areas like New Orleans, portions of the central Gulf Coast as we head through the weekend. The other area that we're watching is expected to bring some very heavy showers to portions of Florida through the weekend. This is Saturday afternoon, starts to move offshore. You see the center of circulation spinning there, starts to form a closed low, and could potentially drift north towards portions, again, of the northern Gulf Coast, the central Gulf Coast, as we head through your Sunday afternoon into Monday, bringing that heavy shower activity possibly to those areas. Our forecast models running on this all start to take this towards portions of Louisiana or Texas. We do have a few outliers, though, and models are usually a little bit less consistent when storms are less organized. So as that area of low pressure becomes better organized, we'll likely get some better model data on where this is expected to go. But as we mentioned, heavy rain in Florida through the weekend. We have flood watches that go all the way through Sunday morning from Bonita Springs up through Tampa along portions of the I-75 corridor, includes portions of Sarasota. Heavy showers expected, especially across southern and central Florida today. More heavy rain for the Keys in southern Florida as we head through your Saturday morning before a lot of that moisture heads offshore and moves to the Gulf of Mexico, where we could potentially see this system develop. Rain totals upwards of 2 to 3, even 4 inches possible along portions of Florida and even into portions of southern Louisiana or the Big Bend area of Florida closer to Tallahassee. We're also watching a heavy rain threat across portions of the Midwest over the next few days, including the chance for some severe weather. Kara tracking storms heading towards portions of Iowa today.
Of moisture coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, going to be kind of combining with a cold front and an upper low that brought the snow the last couple of days. All of that going to be focused in along with all of the surface moisture with this cold front to bring the chance for heavy rain and thunderstorms first to eastern Iowa up into Minnesota, and then transitioning into Saturday we'll be dealing with the potential for some severe storms. Excessive rainfall outlook does cover a lot of eastern Iowa all the way down into Missouri and parts of western Illinois as well. That's where we would expect a little bit more in terms of flooding, and then the lighter green around from nearly to the upper peninsula of Michigan all the way into central Missouri. That's where we have a little bit less of a chance for widespread flooding, but still expecting some very heavy rain with these showers that move up because they are going to be able to tap into all of that Gulf of Mexico moisture. Multiple rounds of rain possible for eastern Iowa into the afternoon and evening, and that will then bleed into parts of Wisconsin. We're really starting to see that heavy rain threat ramp up into western Illinois into Saturday. And then as this all kind of congeals together, combines with peak heating and even more Gulf moisture, we'll be dealing with the potential for some severe storms into Saturday as well. Mostly that will be into northeastern Indiana, southern Michigan, and western Ohio. And this is going to be for gusty straight line winds in addition to frequent lightning and very heavy rain. That's been some of your top weather headlines. For more, head over to our website, weathernationtv.com.
So while the West Coast continues to battle wildfires, residents in southwest Louisiana are still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Laura. It's an area that's very near and dear to my heart because, well, it's where I landed my first news anchor job. So just a few days ago, thanks to this very network, America's Voice, and a very special person who we'll discuss in just a moment, I had the privilege to visit a place I used to call home and hear their story so I can share it with you. Here it is. They call it the Forgotten Storm. But for the residents from Lake Charles, Louisiana, they can't help but be reminded of Hurricane Laura, the most powerful hurricane to hit this area since these remembered. Nearly everywhere you look, you see destruction. Neighborhoods completely unrecognizable. Twisted metal, piles of debris, blown out windows, and a sea of blue tarps for those houses fortunate to still be standing. For some, it seems like just too much to bear.
You see all the destruction in your community, and it's like driving through a tunnel of just destruction. It's taller than your car on both sides.
It's costing more to put gas in the generators than it do to eat. We don't even have, it's hot in the daytime, it's hot at night.
People lost everything, you know. It's just hurtful.
But help is on the way. Several community churches are pulling together and working with organizations and volunteers to bring back this area and help residents rebuild their homes and their lives.
God blessed me and my home wasn't destroyed, so I just feel like I need to bless other people and spread the blessings and help other people.
I strongly believe in paying things forward, so one day if somebody I know or myself or my family is going through this similar thing, that maybe one day we have people come help us. It's just the right thing to do in times like this.
One person hoping to make a big impact is this man, John Schnatter. Once famous for his pizza delivery chain, is now in the business of delivering hope.
Tell us about why you're here.
Well, when you're down on the ground and you personalize it, Jimmy, Roosevelt, Marvin, I mean, these are people's homes. And you got to see it to believe it. A war zone, hurricane, tornado, you just can't imagine. But we're with St. Mary's, Sam Tolbert and his team, the Baptist Convention, and of course you can get, giveawaywithpapa.com. We can do that. But this is just something that we can't overlook. We got to help folks like this because they're in dire need. This is just devastating. But we're all in this together. Let's make it happen. Let's get this place cleaned up.
And on behalf of America's Voice News and the people of Lake Charles, Louisiana, I want to thank John Schnatter for flying us down to the area and for his very generous donation of several $100,000 that he made to help the residents there. We will, of course, continue to keep a very close watch on this area. We know you have a lot of work ahead of you. But as Papa John, as he likes to be referred to, mentioned to us, it's nice to see everyone working together. One of the things that he said to me is that he was pleasantly surprised to see community leaders and officials working together regardless of their party affiliation. Nice to see that happen in Washington, wouldn't it? So some of you reached out to us after seeing our coverage down in Louisiana, something we always encourage you to do because after all, America's Voice is about sharing your voice, and that's what we're going to do right now. So first, we have Sam, who says that he saw our piece on Lake Charles, that he lived there for a few years and would like to know where to donate. And yes, there is a place that you can send help. In fact, anyone who would like to contribute to the recovery efforts that are being made in Lake Charles, you can do so by going to givebackwithpapa.com. Again, that's givebackwithpapa.com. Also, you can contact Samaritan's Purse. So we spoke with the mayor of Lake Charles there, and he says what they need more than ever right now, even more so than food and water, is actual manpower. In other words, volunteers. So if you or someone you know is able to go there and volunteer, check out this website, easy for me to say. It's spvolunteer.org. Again, that's spvolunteer.org. And Ken LaCour also showing his support for the community. Always love to see that. Let's go to his comment saying, "Go Papa John Pizza, delicious pizza," and the company is helping FEMA and the government in Lake Charles after the Cat 4 hurricane. Thank you so much for sending in your support, Mr. LaCour. Just to clarify, while he's still referred to as Papa John, John Schnatter is no longer with the pizza chain. But the donation that he has made was through his actual personal foundation, again, one that you can donate if you'd like to help the people there. And finally, we received this comment from Went, who said in regards to our coverage, "Good, poor Louisiana needs notice by the media. Their tragedy has been overshadowed," he said, "by political garbage and swept under the rug." He went on to say that state was ravaged by Hurricane Laura and has already been forgotten within a week of the storm. Thank you so much for your comment, Mr. Wendt. And while the mainstream media may have forgotten, we here at America's Voice have not. And we pledge to keep continuing this story and bringing you updates. In fact, one of the updates that we received is that this actually might be classified as a Category 5 storm, not just a 4 storm, with some wind gusts reportedly up to 200 miles per hour. So again, if you'd like to get back, that is papa.com that you can go to. All right, stick around. There's still much more to come here on America's Voice. Coming up next, we're going to share your comments in regards to our question about 9/11. With today marking the 19th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, we want to give you an extra opportunity to share your voice. Today we asked you if you felt safer today than you did on that fateful day. Here's a look at some of your answers. First, we heard from Fletcher Smith. He wrote in to say that he didn't feel safer, but that fear has switched to these globalists who want destruction of America. Our next comment comes from Peter Vasquez, who said this, that he didn't feel unsafe before 9/11, but that he thinks TSA was a good idea and that flying is definitely a safer ordeal than it was before. And our next comment comes from Dan Ratcliffe, who said that proud to live in a country that will take the fight to the terrorists. Again, thank you for all of your comments. We have an extra one, don't we? I think we do have an extra one. Can we go to our other comment? Yes, this one comes from Steve Purser, who said that he feels the same, saying that you never know when it's your time to go. Sometimes I'm in a lightning storm in the middle of a lake and it feels like this is it. Again, we appreciate all of your comments. We always encourage you to do that, and there's still time to do that. So again, the question was, do you feel safer today than you did on 9/11? You can always join our community by going to americasvoice.news and let your voice be heard, or you can follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Parlay, CloudHub, LinkedIn, you name it. Let your voice be heard. After all, this show is about you. That will do it for this edition of News On. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. As always, you can follow us again on social media. Stay tuned to America's Voice. We're going to continue to remember those lives that were lost on this fateful day 19 years ago. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again Monday.